Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us again in a continuation of this fascinating series about the Islamic Sharia law. We called it Sharia law, the Muslim Talmud, and that was intentional, of course. And with me, of course, here to unpack all of that for us is our dear brother Lloyd DeYoung. And today we're going to talk about the concept of Ijma, or the scholarly consensus. And with that in mind, I want to welcome Lloyd. Lloyd, thank you so much for the work you do and for this fascinating presentation that I believe it's really well put together, and it will be extremely helpful for many people who hear about Sharia, but maybe they don't know a whole lot about it.
Thank you, Fadi. I'm very privileged, very honored to be here with you.
So what about the Ijma?
You just mentioned the Ijma is the consensus, the major or majority legal opinion of the scholars. It is what they all agree upon. So what you have is this confusion within the Qur'an. There are many contradictions within the hadith and within the Qur'an. You have older verses that contradict newer verses, and these newer verses obviously are superior. So you have this doctrine of abrogation. Within the hadiths, you have newer hadiths that contradict older hadiths. So this all had to be sorted out, and the Ijma is the primary mechanism of understanding the Quran. This is the primary source of authority within Islam. We'll cover all of this, but just briefly, newer hadiths abrogate older hadiths. Newer Quran verses abrogate older Quran verses, but a newer hadith abrogates an older Quran verse, and a newer Quran verse abrogates an older hadith. So this also is something that happens, and the final consensus, what is still relevant after all of this abrogation is what is included in the Sharia. And because the Sharia is the Muslim Talmud, this makes the Imams of Islam effectively the Pharisees of Islam.
Right. Exactly. Excellent point. And it's almost like it filters through the lens of abrogation, and finally you got to yourself what is considered to be now the foundation you stand on. So
it is the practical application of Islam in practice.
Absolutely. So keep going. What else do you want to share with us about that?
Well, let me rather dive into the notes, and I can step through this step by step. And of course, I have sent you the links to all of the resources that I'm using, because I want everyone to be able to download every single resource that I'm referring to. So if you could add those in the description or in a pinned comment later, then everyone can look at all of these references for themselves.
Wonderful. We will do that.
Right. So I can go to the slideshow, and then I will walk everyone through this step by step. So we're discussing scholarly consensus, the Ijma, and we're talking about 4 integrals. These are just 4 things, 4 requirements that must be there for something to become consensus, to become a standard upon which all of the scholars of all the schools of fiqh or the madhabs agree. Now, there are a couple of things. We're using the Reliance of the Traveler, the world's most famous Islamic law manual, and this is the reference here. We'll be using page 22 to 25 and 41 to 43. I will read some extracts. And we're discussing the validity of following qualified scholarship. Muslims must follow a scholar. This is called taqlid, the doctrine of taqlid. We will cover all of these as we go through in the future, but let me go to the Reliance of the Traveler. This is the chapter here. This discusses the superiority of sacred knowledge over devotions. In other words, practicing as a Muslim, doing your devotions, doing the things that a normal Muslim must do as a lay Muslim, is inferior to knowledge of the Sharia, which means that the Imams who know the Sharia, they are superior to the lay Muslim. Now notice, Muslims will always ask, have you consulted a scholar? Well, I went and consulted the scholars by reading the scholarly manuals that the Imams learn at seminary. When they go learn to become a judge or an Imam, they study for 3, 5, 7 years at seminary, and these are the books that they learn from. So Allah says, are those who know and those who do not know equal? Quran 39:9. And the answer, of course, is no. Right, let me continue here. So the Prophet said, whoever Allah wishes well, he gives knowledge of religion. And the Imams are the ones with the knowledge. They are the people of knowledge, the alim. The superiority of the learned Muslim over the devotee is as Muhammad's superiority over the least of the lay Muslims. This is a profound statement. the superiority of the Imams, of the learned, the mujtahids, over the devotee, over the lay Muslim, is as great as the superiority of Muhammad over the least of his followers. This has incredible implications. If you want to add anything, Al-Fadi, please speak up. I'll be happy to let you comment.
No, keep going, brother, but definitely I'll let you know.
This is repeated here. The superiority of the learned Muslim over the devotee is like the superiority of the moon over all the stars. It is very interesting that they use the moon here and not the sun, but that's a story for a different day. The learned are the heirs of the prophets. So the Imams, those who study the Sharia and who have the sacred knowledge, are the heirs of the prophets. The prophets have not bequeathed dinar nor dirham, not money, but they left sacred knowledge. And whoever learns, who receives the sacred knowledge, has an enormous share. So people of knowledge, the alim, they are people of great authority within Islam. He who goes forth to seek sacred knowledge is in the way of jihad until he returns. So learning sacred knowledge is like a form of jihad. Okay?
Right.
So I'm going to skip over that. So we're doing 22 to 25. Right. So the religious scholar is greater in reward than the fighter in the way of Allah. So remember, we are often told that jihad gives you the greatest reward in Islam, killing and being killed in jihad. However, notice the religious scholar is greater in reward than the fighter in the way of Allah. So the one who has learned the sacred knowledge is greater in status, is greater recognized. His knowledge is recognized by Allah and gives him greater reward and greater status than even the jihadi. Right. The scholars are the heirs of the prophets. This really places them in a very high place of authority. Let's continue. Sacred knowledge, meaning the knowledge we are discussing, is a communal obligation. Now, I will delve into the obligations in Islam a little later. There's Fard al-Ain and Fard al-Kifaya. Communal obligation, Fard al-Kifaya, and a personal or universal obligation, Fard al-Ain. They are different things. They have different legal standing. But the communal obligation is superior to the personal obligation in that the person performing it fulfills the need of the Islamic nation and lifts the obligation from it. The obligation of the individual, or Fard al-Ain, is restricted to himself. Now, notice, this means that these scholars are performing duties that the lay Muslim is unable to perform. And they are doing this on behalf of the Ummah, because if they do not do this, because they're the only ones qualified, the only ones capable, the only ones with the knowledge, otherwise the Ummah will fall into the hellfire, according to the way Islam works. Now, let me continue. Notice, verily, your Lord is ready at ambush. Right? So, in fact, Allah threatens the believers who do not follow those scholars of knowledge, who do not follow what they interpret. The way they interpret Islam and teach it, you have to follow that. And if you do not, Allah threatens you. Now, no, let me skip this. So just cut that piece out, please. Let me jump to the next section. Then I will. So now I'm going to page 41, and I want to jump to the next section here. The scholarly consensus, the Ijma, right? Section B 7.0 in Reliance. Notice, all mujtahids of the Muslims in the period of the thing or event agree on its ruling, regardless of their country, race, or group, though non-mujtahids, non-legal scholars, in other words, lay Muslims, are of no consequence. So the opinion of these scholars, these ulama, they have formed these opinions based on the Qur'an, the Sunnah, and their opinions are primary, they are paramount. This interpretation, Muslims love to say it's how it's interpreted. Well, they have decided how it's interpreted, the final interpretation and meaning and application of what is in the Qur'an and the Sunnah. Non-mujtahids are of no consequence. So the opinion of those YouTube commentators are of no consequence. Now, notice, once the scholars have all agreed, especially this starts with the scholars who founded the four schools of fiqh, of the madhabs. It says here, the ruling that is agreed upon, the ijma ruling, is an authoritative part of sacred law that is obligatory to obey, and it is not lawful to disobey it. Nor can mujtahids of a succeeding era make the thing an object of a new ijtihad, because the ruling on it, verified by scholarly consensus, is an absolute legal ruling, which does not admit of being contravened or annulled. It cannot be abrogated. So do understand, the Quran was abrogated. We know that abrogation exists in the Quran. Newer verses have abrogated older verses, but notice the Sharia cannot be abrogated. It is the final understanding of Islam. The proof of the legal authority of scholarly consensus is that just as Allah has ordered the believers in the Qur'an to obey Him and His Messenger, so too He ordered them to obey those of authority, the Ulul al-Amr, among them, saying, O you who believe, obey Allah, obey the Prophet, and those of authority among you. So do understand, within the Sharia, within the Islamic law, the fiqh, the scholars are in charge. They've inherited this authority from Muhammad. They're in this line of authority. They are now responsible. The amr, the power, exists within them, and they must manage the affairs of the of the ummah. So obey the Prophet and those of authority among you. So they are now effectively the authority of Muhammad. They speak with the authority of Muhammad.
Right.
Such that when those of authority in legal expertise, the mujtahids, agree upon a ruling, it is obligatory, in the very words of the Qur'an, which is the literal speech of Allah, to follow them and carry out their judgment. Allah threatens those who oppose the messenger and follow other than the Prophet's way, saying, whoever controverts the messenger after guidance has become clear to him and follows other than the believer's way, we shall give him over to the hellfire. And then the final section here.
Yeah, go ahead.
A second evidentiary aspect is that a ruling agreed upon by all the mujtahids in the Islamic community, the ummah, is in fact the ruling of the community. So the community, the lay community, has no say. The ummah has made the decision. This is the law. And the community is divinely protected from error. Their rulings are absolute. They can make no mistakes, and Allah prevents them from making any mistakes. Because Allah said, my community shall not agree on an error. Allah is not wont to make my community concur on misguidance. Therefore, they can never be wrong. Their rulings cannot be questioned because Allah has guided them to an absolute ruling free from error. That which the Muslims consider good, Allah considered good. Your thoughts, Al-Fadi?
No, I mean, it's just definitely fascinating, and I'm hoping that our viewers will begin to understand now why. Sometimes they will say, well, this jihadi, for instance, followed which opinion? Or why are there somebody, in the Middle East, for instance, denying that what the jihadis did to be Islamic and so on and so forth? But obviously, it's all emotional arguments, has nothing to do with really the foundation for how things work. And I'm glad you mentioned Fard Ain and Fard Kifaya, and you mentioned all of these things because it shows that there are much bigger pictures when it comes, obviously, to how these decisions are made, whether it is jihad, whether it's fasting, whether it's prayer, whether it's making up for things that you could not do while you're sick, for instance, or during menstruation, or even, any other, rituals or things that you do in your daily life. Muslims have to know really what school or which opinion they're basing their actions upon. And that's complicated in of itself, but you're putting it together in a way that is simplifying all of these concepts for people. So it shows the importance of these scholars. And I like the fact that you called them like the Islamic Pharisees. Indeed, that's how they're looked upon. Whatever they say goes, and if you go against what they say, you're in deep trouble, technically speaking, because now you are violating really the knowledge of the learned Muslim scholars, according to the Quran, who ought to be listened to and followed. So thank you so much for this, and hopefully everybody is enjoying this series. Until next time, have a blessed day. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, CIRA International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.